In the rural expanses of the American West, cutting firewood in the national forest is a common task for many households preparing for winter. Growing up in mountainous central Idaho, our family followed this tradition. After school, my dad would pick up me and my brothers, and we would venture into the mountains to gather firewood. It was a physically demanding but necessary chore. One day, we decided to explore a different logging road on the other side of the valley, seeking a change of scenery. This road had fallen into disrepair, with rocks and fallen branches obstructing our path. My brothers and I had to clear the way as my dad maneuvered the truck up the winding switchbacks. Slowly but surely, we made our way up the mountain, step by step. As we hiked, an odd sensation started to envelop me. I couldn't discern whether it was due to exhaustion or something more sinister. It felt as though electricity permeated the air, as if the mountain itself was aware of our presence and resented it. Before I could voice my unease, my younger brother expressed his similar feelings, and my older brother and I silently nodded in agreement. However, my dad honked the horn, urging us to continue clearing the path. Reluctantly, we pressed on until we reached a small clearing where we finally parked the truck. My dad, oblivious to our apprehension or perhaps choosing to disregard it, began his work, felling the dead trees. As we loaded the wood into the truck, an ominous sensation gripped me, as if a dark shroud enveloped the entire scene. I noticed my brothers stealing occasional glances over their shoulders as we worked. It seemed that everyone, except my dad, was on edge. Twilight descended, intensifying my anxiety. It wasn't until my dad unexpectedly told us to load up the truck that a wave of relief washed over me. The tension seemed to dissipate, and everyone appeared more at ease. However, we only had a half load, an unusual occurrence since my dad preferred a full load before heading home. Yet, he seemed eager to leave. With everything securely loaded, we began our descent from the mountain. Despite our exhaustion, a lighter mood filled the truck cabin, and we engaged in lighthearted conversation, attempting to release the tension built up during the afternoon. As we approached the tree line, cautious driving was essential, especially with a partial load. Suddenly, a brown blur darted across the switchback, causing my dad to slam on the brakes, exclaiming "shit" in frustration. With the truck at a standstill, we peered through the windshield, speechless. Illuminated by our headlights, a crumpled deer lay in front of us. Annoyed and cursing the deer's existence, my dad stepped out of the truck to assess the situation. Following his instructions, my brothers stayed put while I disobeyed, trailing close behind my dad. Thankfully, the truck remained unharmed, with only a few traces of fur and blood on the grill guard. Colliding with a deer wasn't entirely uncommon, given the prevalence of wildlife in the mountains. However, what struck us as odd was the deer's immediate demise. Typically, after a collision, deer might still be capable of standing and fleeing into the woods before succumbing to their injuries, but this deer had fallen instantly, as if its life had been abruptly extinguished. Before we even approached the carcass, a putrid stench assaulted our senses. Deer, even when alive, had an unpleasant odor, but this was something far more repulsive. It carried the scent of decay and rot, making my stomach churn. As we drew near, the overpowering smell made my eyes water. The scene before us was nothing short of horrific. The deer's eye sockets were empty, replaced by sunken, hollow pits. Its swollen, blackened tongue protruded from its mouth, as if compensating for the absence of its eyes. The underbelly had split open, spilling entrails and offal onto the ground. In the dim glow of the headlights, it appeared as though the fur and innards of the deer were moving, almost wriggling. Holding my breath, I crouched down for a closer look and froze. Maggots covered the deer, both inside and out. It was undeniably dead, but our truck hadn't killed it. Clearly, the deer had been dead for days, if not weeks. Repulsed and retching, I stumbled backward. The electric anxiety I had felt earlier returned with a vengeance. My dad, usually stoic and composed, displayed a look of sheer horror on his face, barely concealing his fear. His gaze wasn't fixed on the deer, but rather on the dark expanse of the mountain beyond. Masking his trepidation with a stern voice, he ordered me to return to the truck and get inside. Without protest, I complied, rushing to the door just as a blood-curdling shriek pierced the air. Branches snapped and shattered, indicating that something was ascending the slope towards us. I slammed the door shut, and my dad reached the truck seconds later. Before he could close his own door, he stepped on the accelerator, propelling the truck forward. We drove over the deer carcass and hurtled downhill. Amidst our shouts and cries, it was difficult to discern if the shrieking followed us. It was only when we emerged from the tree line into the desert of sagebrush that everything fell silent, except for the rumble of the engine and the wind streaming through the half-open windows. As we pulled into our property, the truck came to a stop. None of us made a move to leave the vehicle. The silence hung heavily in the air. Then, we all started speaking at once, questions pouring out in a frenzy. What was that screaming? How could a dead deer leap uphill in front of a moving truck? There was no way our truck had caused its demise. My dad shook his head, his expression filled with a mix of disbelief and terror. He explained that throughout the day on the mountain, he had felt an unsettling presence, but he chose to keep it to himself, not wanting to worry us. He likened it to entering a stranger's house while they were upstairs sleeping, a feeling of intrusion that never left him. As twilight approached, he caught sight of shadows moving among the trees. They were elusive, darting behind trunks before he could get a good look. A wave of dread washed over him. Trying to maintain composure, he hurried us into the truck, desperate to leave. It wasn't until the deer incident, when he realized the deer had been thrown at us, that my dad pieced together what had transpired. Something had orchestrated that eerie trap, luring us into its clutches. Before the screams echoed through the night, he had heard movement in the darkness beyond the road. It was a calculated ambush. Rushing back to the truck could have triggered a chase or an attack, so we walked back cautiously. The moment we were safely inside the truck, my dad pressed down on the accelerator, determined not to stop for anyone or anything. The sensation of electricity finally subsided as we reached the county highway. My brothers and I never saw what pursued us, but the echoes of those bone-chilling screams would forever haunt our memories. We didn't gather firewood for the rest of that season. Instead, my dad purchased what we needed. The following year, we resumed our firewood gathering routine, but we never returned to that specific mountain. The Forest Service had permanently closed and reclaimed the road, and the only way back into those woods was a long hike, a journey I had no desire to undertake. Whatever dwelled on that mountain, whatever threw that deer carcass, and whatever pursued us, it was clear that it did not want us there. Its intentions were malicious, and it sought to rid the intruders, or worse, to claim our lives. My friend and I had heard rumors about strange phenomena on a particular road known for its mysterious occurrences. We were driving late at night, the rain pouring down, when we noticed something peculiar on the horizon. There was a glowing light, incredibly bright, almost resembling a sunset despite the late hour. It was just a single light, not like the high beams of a car that would typically illuminate the sky. As we approached the first hill, we realized that the light remained stationary and didn't seem to be getting any closer. It was as if it was right in the middle of the road. We couldn't fathom what it could be. A motorcycle? Unlikely, given the late hour and the rain. The brightness of the light was intense, and there was an eerie quality to it. We continued driving, trying to get a better look, but the light remained unchanged. It didn't move, grow brighter, or appear larger, no matter how fast we were going. And then, in a matter of seconds, it simply vanished. The light didn't extinguish instantly. It dimmed gradually, like turning off a fluorescent bulb. The hair on the back of our neck stood up, as if we had just experienced one of those famous phantom headlights that were the subject of so many stories. But here's the strange part. As we drove on for another half a minute after the light disappeared, we reached the spot where it had been shining from, and what passed us was just a beat-up sedan with headlights that couldn't possibly account for the intense light we had witnessed. I mentioned the car just to maintain a sense of rationality, to cling to the possibility that it was the source of the light. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something inexplicable had occurred. The way it behaved, the timing, and our location. It all seemed to defy any logical explanation. Since then, my friend and I have become fascinated with the haunted tales surrounding that road. We've delved into the stories and experiences shared by others, seeking any information that could shed light on the strange occurrences. If anyone else has encountered similar phenomena or has stories to share, we would love to hear from you. Maybe it's worth taking a drive along that eerie 18-mile stretch, capturing any unusual events on camera. Gathering more information about this haunted road could help us uncover the truth behind these inexplicable events. I appreciate all the comments and discussions sparked by my previous post. It's intriguing to hear different perspectives and personal accounts of the supernatural. If you have any more stories or insights to share, please do so. Let's continue unraveling the mysteries of this haunting road together. About 3 years ago, I experienced an unsettling incident that still gives me chills whenever I think about it. I reside in a rural area encompassed by a beautiful nature conservation zone, which offers serene walking paths and biking trails. On that particular day, I decided to take my dog for an evening stroll in this tranquil setting. My plan wasn't to venture too far, and unusually, I left my phone at home, although I typically carry it as a precaution. As I embarked on our walk, everything seemed to be going smoothly, and true to form, I encountered only a handful of people along the way. Eventually, I arrived at my favorite spot, a wooded area with a field beyond it. My intention was to walk all the way to the end and then retrace my steps for the journey home. As I continued along the path after passing through the wooded area, I noticed that my dog was behaving strangely. She kept glancing back and appeared reluctant to move forward. Initially, I assumed she had caught sight of a deer or a rabbit, so I didn't think much of it. I didn't immediately turn to investigate. However, my dog's behavior took a more alarming turn when she emitted a low growl, almost like a warning bark. This was highly unusual, and it instantly caught my attention. I turned around, to my horror, spotted a man standing at the edge of the wooded area, right next to the field, mere 10 meters away from the path. He stood motionless, fully clothed, his gaze fixed upon us. My heart raced, and a surge of fear coursed through my veins. I realized that no matter which direction I chose, I would still be in a secluded area for some time. Without further thought, I quickened my pace, urging my dog to keep moving. Yet, she remained apprehensive. When I glanced back after putting some distance between us and the man, I noticed that he had also shifted his position. Now, he stood on the field, his intense gaze unbroken. It was a clear sign that we needed to take immediate action. I didn't dare look back until we reached the end of the field. A cluster of trees obstructed my view, preventing me from seeing if he was still there. However, my dog seemed slightly calmer, providing a glimmer of relief. Despite this, I didn't allow myself more than a few seconds to pause. Instead, I chose a path that would lead us back to the populated area of our town as swiftly as possible. We practically ran, and the sense of relief washed over me when we finally reached the familiar surroundings of civilization. To this day, I have no clue about the man's intentions or what might have transpired had my dog not alerted me to his presence. I remain immensely grateful for her vigilance and for keeping us out of harm's way.